If there is one section or group of loadouts in Hell Let Loose that epitomizes sabotage and intelligence stealing, it is the Recon class or Recon loadouts. An effective Recon team, when used properly, can do massive amounts of damage to the enemy team and give your team the necessary intelligence to push forward and destroy enemy tanks, garrisons, and just push the enemy back as you need them to. But a lot of times Recon teams, when they're played in regular games, are always seemingly on the front line acting as sniper teams. Well, although you could do this, there's way better ways to utilize all the weapons in the spotter and sniper's arsenal. And that's what this guy's going to talk about. How to play Recon right. To start off, let's talk about the different roles that can be filled in a Recon squad. You have the spotter and the sniper. So the spotter is the squad lead of the group, essentially the person that can report back to command about what they're doing, what they're seeing, and just anything that they need to report on. The sniper, on the other hand, is essentially a rifleman with a scoped weapon, maybe a grenade or a mine or two, depending on the class, and can be used to target long-range targets or help scout certain areas out due to the fact that they have a scoped weapon. When playing Recon, it's important to have a spotter more than a sniper, as a spotter can report back to command and ask for things like supply drops or potentially airstrikes, depending on what you report back on. Having a sniper without a squad lead or a spotter is essentially just a wandering rifleman with no true direction. And at that point, all you're doing is going for kills rather than actually going after garrisons or spawn points, as you should be as a sniper. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the weapons you have. So if you're just starting out with the spotter class, the first class you'll have will be typically an SMG or submachine gun class with some mines, grenades, and some ammo. Once you've unlocked the next class, it'll be labeled with a flare gun. From here you have a bolt action rifle or semi-automatic rifle, typically with a flare gun, which we'll get to as we move through the video. For snipers, you will typically have a bolt action rifle to start off with across all the different factions. But if you're playing the Russians or the main German army, not the one in El Alamein, you will have a chance to get a semi-automatic rifle, such as an FG-42 or SVT-40. But with the other factions, such as the British and American factions, you will only have access to a bolt-action rifle at this class, just with maybe a smoke bomb or two, instead of regular frag grenades. So now that we've talked about the classes and some of the weapons that they have, let's go into how you should go about your objectives as a Recon team. Simply put, you need to get behind the enemy lines. And the way you can do this in a fast manner is by taking a truck from the HQ, driving around the edges of the map, or at least the area that the enemy is not concentrated in, and getting around the enemy where their lines are least defended. Now, is this a surefire way to get behind enemy lines every single time? No, there's always a chance you might run into someone. But the important thing is to get away from the enemy objective and find a gap in the enemy's lines using a truck for fast access to get behind the enemy lines so you can set up your outpost. Speaking of outposts, Recon teams can place them anywhere on the map. So if there's one special ability that you do have as Recon, it's that. So regardless of game mode, as long as you can get back to a certain area without getting kicked out by the game, you can place your outpost there. Now, I'll break this down in a more simplistic fashion. In warfare mode, you can essentially put the outpost anywhere, regardless of red zone or blue zone control. If you're playing on offensive as the attacking team, you can place your outpost 4 red squares in. And if you are the defending team and you're playing Recon, you can place your outpost 2 squares into the red, provided you are not going into the enemy's HQ sector, as it is blocked off by the game. Now, once you find a nice little spot to place your outpost and you've gotten established behind the enemy lines, safe and sound, you can start doing what you're meant to do. Calling out enemy positions, tanks, and also trying to sabotage the enemy's war effort. In the ways you should be calling out stuff, it's very important that you mark it with an appropriate marker, whether that be infantry, a vehicle, a tank marker, a garrison marker, whatever it is, and in the sector that it's at. That way, when you call it out to command chat, you can advise essentially where it's at, such as maybe enemy garrison sector G6. And that way, when anyone goes to check the marker and they see a garrison, they can find out pretty much where it's at. So they know where to view where the attack is coming from or where to attack if they're assaulting the garrison. Now that alone does a lot. But another thing you can do that can provide an even bigger boost to your team is sabotaging enemy garrisons and nodes. By doing this, you will set back the enemy's war effort tremendously. Garrisons are very vital in a game like Hell Let Loose, where there's only a limited number of spawn points. And living off of outposts and the headquarters spawn isn't enough to win a game single-handedly. So garrisons are important. By knocking these out, you essentially eliminate a spawn point that the entire team can use, and you could essentially derail an attack or defense if used properly with the rest of your team. Now, certain garrisons will take differing times to destroy. I shall explain. When destroying a garrison on warfare mode, if it's within the blue zone or 2 red squares in, it can be destroyed within 5 seconds. If it is past the 2 red squares, say maybe at rail crossing in this example, or in those square areas, then it'll take 30 seconds. If you're playing offensive and you are the attacking team, the same principles apply. 2 red squares in, it takes 5 seconds. Anything past that, it's 30 seconds. Now, if you're playing as a defending team on offensive, any blue zone enemy garrisons you define can be destroyed within 5 seconds, but any red zone garrisons, regardless of location, can only be destroyed in 30 seconds. Another thing you should be targeting is enemy nodes. By destroying even one singular node, you could damage the enemy's war economy and can prevent them from maybe calling in a bombing run or a heavy tank. Just make sure you know which one you're destroying so you know which economy you're influencing more of. Now, the most likely place you'll find enemy nodes typically within the enemy HQ or right where the HQ sectors end. Typically, in this example, say the H or I line. But you could find nodes anywhere in the red zone because those are the only places they can build them. But like I said, HQs and at least where the HQ sectors end are typically places you could check that you'll be likely to find nodes at. Another big opportunity if you're not hunting garrisons or nodes is dealing with enemy artillery players. If the enemy has a really good artillery player, this could really slow down your assault or stop it entirely and help the enemy push through your defense. Now, the current meta of the game is to have someone sit at the artillery to essentially prevent the enemy from using artillery at all. Personally, I don't subscribe to this. I feel like there's many more things you could be doing with your time and effort that could go to destroying the enemy team as a whole rather than derailing artillery. As, first off, the artillery may not always be being used. Secondly, the artillery uses munitions that the commander needs to call in airstrikes. A third major thing, just because you deal with the artillery doesn't mean the enemy still won't push through you if they have the spawn points and the coordination to assault or defend an objective. So yes, artillery should be dealt with, but nodes and garrisons come first. If anything, just send your sniper back every now and then to deal with the artillery if it's becoming a massive pain. Now, once you've reached level 3 and you've unlocked the next loadout for the spotter, you can get something really nice called the flare gun. This is something you can use to illuminate enemy targets in a given area that you think enemies are at. Typically, you could use these on enemy points or, again, suspected enemy movements. And what it does is it forms a nice orange circle around the area that you flared so that vehicles can be shown on the map and enemy infantry can be shown on the map. The best range you could really realistically get from a flare gun is about 200 to 210 meters if you aim properly and you don't hit anything like a tree. But these can be used to see what's on the enemy point to help your team out. Search for enemy garrisons potentially behind the lines or in certain areas if you think people are around. Or just in general to help you out. Maybe if you think enemies are around and you need to clear them out, you can launch a flare by your location and at least get a pinpoint on where the enemies are shooting at you. After all, this game is sometimes kind of hard to pinpoint where enemies are at. So the flare works and everyone can see it. Now, one thing I want to mention with the flare guns is essentially some of the limitations they have or things you can do to refill them. So you only get one shot with the flare gun, but you can refill them using explosive ammo boxes. However, you can only resupply once per life at the same ammo box. However, you can go to other ammo boxes during the same life and refill at them, as long as they are simply a different ammo box. Now, through all of this, one thing you should be utilizing the most is stealth. This is a big thing in making sure you're not firing at everything that moves, which can be very common in a game like Hell Let Loose where you want to kill enemies. That's cool and all, but by firing and shooting at enemies, you're effectively giving away your location. And as a recon team, you're not heavily armed to deal with enemy squads of infantry, even with a sniper as a backup. So it's important to stealth your way through, almost like you're playing all gillied up on MW2. Shoot only when you need to and when you're detected, because killing a garrison is more important than killing 3 or 4 guys that are going to respawn anyway. Having a sniper for backup is nice to help you overtake objectives if you have to shoot your way through an objective or to get to a garrison. But it's important to use stealth as it'll keep you alive longer and it'll save your outpost for later. If you can get away with shooting an enemy, go ahead. But just remember, Other enemies might be nearby that you haven't seen, and it could lead to your downfall. A good recon team can effectively derail any team. By destroying enemy garrisons, enemy nodes, using stealth to do so, and just making yourself a massive hindrance to the enemy, you'll make it easier for the frontline troops to push through and hopefully win you the game. So as long as you have patience and a good mindset of not prioritizing kills over garrison kills, then you'll be in good shape. And you can do all this even if you're a solo spotter, or a spotter with a sniper. As long as you're playing the spotter position, you can have a lot of impact in the game compared to being a sniper. That way you can place OPs and actually talk to command. But I hope you got something out of it in this little remaster that I'm going to start doing for all my videos in the guide department for all the classes. But thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.